I call Alfred Naro.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise to take a call in this first reading of the Trade Anti-Dumping and Countervailing Duties Amendment Bill in its first reading. As the previous speaker has been talking about, that this is not the big ideal, well, we would agree. This is not the big ideal. This is one part of a comprehensive plan, and if I focus on this bill in particular, Mr Speaker, there's been lots of comments in regards to the construction industry. Obviously, there was a study that was conducted in 2013. In fact, it was the Residential Construction Sector Market Study, and Cabinet papers clearly indicate that after that study that was considered, it was in 2014 in which the Cabinet considered this to suspend the tariffs that were on in the construction industry that was important. So there was some comment about the fact that why has it taken so long. That period of 3 years, Mr Speaker, is quite critically important. Any cost-benefit analysis has to be done over a period of time, and hence the reason for that period of 3 years from when that was enacted in 2014. Mr Speaker, the other thing is that when we think about the construction industry and we think about, I suppose, the cause and effect of the removal of the tariffs at that time, one of the things is that was of concern when we think about housing and the construction. The way that that's quantified in cases both here and abroad, and particularly if we think about Australia as given an example. So it's a costing and quantified per square metre. And at that time, the averages were around about, so for New Zealand, for instance, in Australia, the average build, so that's from design to build to a code of compliance and completion to handing over the keys to the new owners, the average cost in Australia, okay, is around about $1,200, Mr Speaker, given the exchange rate for us as well. If we think about what the comparative of that in New Zealand, it's around about 2,500. If you were to do the sums, the average house of 150 square metres would cost around about $375,000. That's just to build and complete. Now, we know with that costing, there had to be some means in for us to be able to try and to capture that cost and try and reduce it so that our consumers could benefit from this. So hence the reason why the whole aspect of reducing those tariffs was quite critically important. There's been a lot of lessons that have been learned from that. The previous speaker talked about the regulatory impact statement, which has talked about that. One of the things that did come out of that, so while cost had been reduced, when we think about certain building requirements that were there. In fact, in paragraph 31 of the regulatory impact statement, it talks about that. It was talking about reinforcing steel and coil, plaster boards, nails, reinforcing steel and so forth. They were just part of a test to see the reduction that that would have. But one of the things that did come out of that, Mr Speaker, and hence the clause inside this bill, which is critically important, is the public interest test, Mr Speaker, in the regulatory impact. They call it the BPIT, a Better Public Interest Test, and that's to ensure that consumers would benefit. So while we can reduce that, and maybe to the manufacturer and the supplier there may be an added benefit, what wasn't clear was to see that how the consumer was also benefiting from the reduce of the tariffs. So, Mr Speaker, we are happy to hear that the support is across the House, bar the Greens. We think that actually to Select Committee we will hear from submissions from the sector, we'll hear from those who are consumers. We think that that will give us a good indication about the direction that this bill is taking. We think the discretion that's been afforded to the Minister is important to that as well. So we support this bill in its first reading to the Select Committee. Mr Speaker, I commend this bill to the House.
Members, this debate has concluded. The question